Good afternoon. We are in the special business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, July 23rd, our last meeting before the summer break. I think everybody's happy about that. We're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, at Squamish, please Tulukamuk, Class Squamish, Owamio. We have an amended agenda in front of us, which adds item 2 under staff reports on the community energy and emissions plan, as well as a couple of letters under correspondence for action. So a motion to move the amended agenda. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. First up is bylaws, and this is adoption of the District of Squamish camping bylaw number 2679, 2019. Councillor Race. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor French. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is adoption of District of Squamish Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 2418-2015, Amendment Camping Bylaw number 2680-2019. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, District of Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw number 1832-2004, Amendment Bylaw number 2686-2019. Moved by Councillor Hurford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for coming today. Thank you to staff for their work on this very much. Okay, next up, staff reports. First up is the BC Rural Dividend Program application. A couple of different options in front of council today. I'm assuming that our economic development officer will be presenting this.
She will be coming. She's probably watching on.
So now we have to look at Mr. Buxton and see what she gets. So just a bit of context, this grant, the deadline is always in August, so we're looking at putting forward a proposal for funding in this, there she is, for this year, with the options presented today, otherwise we wait till next August.
That's right.
All right. Didn't think we'd be so efficient on
No.
All right, over to you, Morgan.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Kate Mulligan. I'm the Economic Development Officer for the District of Squamish, and I'm joined by Gary Buxton, and he's just made the presentation, as well as I think Courtney Dashburn will be joining us as well. So we're here today to talk about the BC Rural Dividend Grant application. Maybe I'll just switch seats here. And our objective is that we're seeking Council's approval to submit an application, a single application for funding of $100,000 via the BC Rural Dividend Program. And as part of the application process, we require a resolution from Council. The timing of the application is, so the application is actually due August 15th. And so that's why we are presenting 2 options today to you instead of coming to you maybe through a committee of the whole to discuss those options because we are a little bit tight on timing. And we will present the 2 options as option A and option B. So just to give you a little bit of background on the BC Rural Dividend, for those of you who are not familiar, currently it's in its 4th year, and this is the 6th intake. The fund is set up to assist rural communities of 25,000 or less. So we are getting close to the threshold. This may be, in fact, our last time that we are able to apply. The purpose of the fund is to strengthen and diversify local economies. There are 3 funding streams available. One for project development, which is up to $10,000, which is really just setting up communities to be able to apply in the future for a grant, a single or a partnered application, which have different funding requirements on the part of the partners or the single applicant. The maximum application for a single applicant is $100,000, and that requires 20% of the total project costs to come from that applicant. And who is eligible? The District of Squamish is eligible under the single application stream, so generally not-for-profit organizations, local government, and so on are able to apply. It's not meant as a for-profit application. And we were successful in 2017 with the BC Rural Dividend grant funding for 2 projects, which we received $116,500 for. One of them is being delivered right now by the Squamish Chamber, which you may be familiar with. It's called the Service Excellence Program, which was co-developed between the Chamber, Tourism Squamish, and the District of Squamish. And the purpose of that program was to be able to provide frontline to executive management training to our local business community. And to date, it's been very successful. And the second program is an open data program. And that is really to enhance our access, the quality, integrity of open data throughout the community. And through that process, things like the indicators dashboard for economic development were developed. We are developing an data management plan that sits behind that, as well as custom research and data that's made available to not only the district, but to the district's partners through a restricted portal. So we still have more work underway, including the impact study for tourism and a plan for future impact studies that will be an outcome of this funding. So there's 2 recommendations because there's 2 different options that are presented to council. The first one is that the District of Squamish authorize the submission of an application to the BC Rural Dividend Program to support the development of an affordable housing governance structure and to develop a workforce rental housing program supporting the Squamish affordable housing strategy. Or that the District of Squamish authorize the submission of an application to the BC Rural Dividend Program to support the development and pilot implementation of a Squamish business acceleration program to support the growth of existing Squamish businesses. So we're just going to get into the first option, what we're proposing, why we're proposing it, and then we'll get into option B. So the very first one, there's 2 initiatives that's proposed under option A. The very first component is affordable housing governance structure development. And this project would support the development of a governance model and structure for the provision and management of affordable housing in the district. It would not replace the existing funding that's being planned around the governance structure. This would be to basically coordinate and manage the establishment of the governance structure. Did you want to add anything to that? Pardon? It would. And the second would be a workforce rental housing program, which is the homeowner matching program. So feasibility and framework to develop a program to develop match Squamish homeowners with Squamish businesses to provide rental workforce housing to employees via leases. And the other one would be feasibility framework development for encouraging the provision of workforce housing on ready to develop vacant land. So there's 2 different programs that fall under the workforce rental housing program. And the idea would be that through option A, we would work on these 2 different components.
So for clarity, because of the little sidebar that happened there, do you want to go back to the affordable housing governance structure development and lock that out of the park?
Sure. So that's part of the ongoing work that I was sort of tasked with this year. So you've seen the housing program and the strategy and the PAH policy that came, one of which is coming back to council. That work has been chewing through that budget, which is, my recollection is it's around $90,000. So I've used some of that already. There's a partnering agreement with Sea to Sky Community Services that's coming out of that budget as well. that work is just starting. The work on the governance structure was supposed to come next later on in the year, and that's getting increasingly difficult to do. So this would supplement and or possibly replace some of those funds, but allow that work to move a little faster than it currently is.
Thank you.
Okay.
So it wouldn't, it quite possibly could replace some of the funds, but what it's really likely to do is that if we get the grant, accelerate that work.
Thanks.
Okay. So, why? So why housing? I know that affordable housing is a pillar of Council's strategic plan, and that it's of primary focus of staff of the district to work on. And why economic development? Well, economic development has identified with its partners in speaking to businesses and surveying businesses and conducting research that the lack of affordable housing, in particular workforce housing, is prohibiting growth of our local business economy. So what we really want to do is help expedite the completion of a housing governance structure, but also create some programs right away that are going to help augment what's available in terms of workforce housing inventory. And unless the governance structure is in place, it's going to be hard to implement some of those programs. Our goal with the programs that are tied specifically to workforce, provision of workforce rental housing, would depend on having an agency essentially to be able to then manage it. So by no means is this project intended to actually create a structure and to implement the structure. The idea would be to create structures or programs for the provision of housing to then hand off to the appropriate party to manage and implement. So one of the most recent pieces that was developed by the Squamish Chamber of Commerce in 2018 with Tourism Squamish identified that it's the #1 challenge in terms of recruiting and retaining staff, and that out of the businesses that answered, 1 in 2 businesses would be likely to recommend an employee to an employee housing program. So we are really focused right now on what type of business infrastructure needs to be in place to move forward successfully from an economic development perspective. Housing and employment space seem to be the 2 top infrastructures that are required. So, and it really fits and aligns, as I mentioned, to Council's priority areas. So it supports the attraction and retention of local workforce, thus reducing the need to commute and contributing to GHG emission reductions. Housing affordability and diversity provides additional options to homeowners currently conducting short-term rentals or not utilizing their non-primary residency property. So I know Asia and Sarah had been here to present on options or recommendations for short-term rentals. And this may provide an alternative to homeowners that are currently renting short-term as a new revenue stream for them. It also works to help the affordable housing stock overall. And the economy and local jobs, so it provides flexibility and security to businesses and landlords while increasing access to housing stock for local workforce. So that one's pretty clear because our research has told us this is the #1 constraint right now for growth locally. So the implications of this would be a total project cost of $100,000. The district contribution would be $10,000 in kind, $10,000 cash. We would use our existing budget in economic development to fund the $10,000 in cash, and we haven't estimated an increase in resources at this time. And the proposed funding through the BC Rural Dividend would be $80,000 in a cash contribution. We would, from an organizational impact, hire 1 temporary FTE or contract for the year to implement the work that needs to be done, or a combination thereof. And the oversight would be provided by economic development, but by no means exclusively. It would be in partnership with planning department and Gary on the affordable housing file.
Right.
And so that basically concludes option A. Do we want to move right into option B and present that?
Any questions of clarity on option A before we move on to B? Councilor Schiller?
Is the Whistler workforce housing managed by the Whistler Housing Authority, do you know?
So there's a couple of different programs that are operating, and there is a program that much is aligned to what we're suggesting around the matching program. I believe that one is managed by the Housing Authority. Is Courtney? That is right, yeah, the Housing Authority. So the other program, like the actual ownership model, I'm not clear on that one. Do you know if that one is? WHA, yeah, it is.
Mr. Anderson?
I believe it was last week, we were discussing with Linda Glenday regarding the governance structure, discussing an update. And the question was asked whether that would come back to council, the membership structure of the governance entity. Would you suggest that would come back to us for discussion?
As part of this project?
Yes.
If the project.
If we go ahead.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
we can't make any of those decisions without councils.
Having background on a housing task force, I have sort of particular perspective on a need for diversity among membership of such an entity. But the second question I have is, the vacant land matching program, I can see that we set up a feasibility and framework, but would we be accountable for meeting any targets? Because it's going to be very difficult. That's a very challenging task. So would that be the case?
It would, this would not be focused so much on targets as it would be to make sure that the climate for that opportunity be put in place. So I guess looking at policy, looking at incentives, and how that could impact on the ability to create workforce housing through the vacant landowner and said partner. So that the objective would be more aligned about the creating the right climate or conditions for that,
Very good.
as
Thank
opposed
you.
to a target.
Any other questions on option A? I asked the land matching piece, you're considering modular housing. Maybe.
At this point, we haven't included the idea of temporary housing. We have initially had explored the possibility or potential for modular housing or housing of all kinds. We've removed the reference to modular housing and have actually just focused on the idea of just provision of housing, and would follow, I guess, in the development of what we're asking said contractor or employee to do, to focus on more permanent housing opportunities, legacy housing. Whether the workforce housing would be created with a temporary, in a temporary nature or not, and moved into a different stock of housing is unknown at this time, because it would be, wouldn't be managed by the district. It would be private housing, right?
Yeah, my concern is that we're not setting up like a work camp model.
No.
Or the idea of modular housing is a concern to me, because once you put someone in a home, it's a home.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the landowner then wants to develop the land, all you've done is move the problem a few years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And then now people are in a home, and where do we put that home?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to be really careful about that piece.
Mm-hmm.
I know modular housing has been a short-term solution for housing in the metro environment, but also now they're talking about it being permanent housing. So I'm trying to get in my mind what we're thinking of here. I mean,
Well, we've excluded any reference to temporary or modular in nature. I mean, whether a house is developed in a modular fashion or not doesn't necessarily mean whether it's temporary or permanent, but we don't have any reference to temporary, so.
So we are thinking about legacy home building.
If we decide to pursue option A, have we given thought to what part of the workforce segment we're thinking of? Like, in my mind, I'm hesitant to facilitate sort of minimum wage housing, and would hope to see that we could target sort of more medium to upper levels of income and facilitate that sort of economic growth. Have we given thought to that kind of thing?
So for the, what do you want to?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what our current program targets.
The affordable housing program.
Yeah.
And that would continue in this.
But, I mean, for the homeowner matching program, really that's just up, dependent on what the property, what's being available in terms of rental stock. So that's really targeting a homeowner with rental stock and trying to provide an opportunity to link the homeowner to an employer. So that's one program, and that isn't necessarily geared towards a particular, whether it's a minimum wage earner or middle class earner, whatever that may be. It's not targeting that, and it would be difficult to do that because we're just creating a shell of a program and then letting homeowners self-identify and employers self-identify. But for the inventory of vacant land, that would be an opportunity where the developer, I would assume, would need to also look at what the demand is and what the market potential is for said workforce housing, because it would be developed privately. Doesn't mean we can't put policy in place to try to incentivize the development of certain tiers or classes of housing, I would say. Types of housing, yeah.
And I guess that's what I was wondering, in a homeowner, I can't remember what the name is, but the matching program, I mean, maybe there are conditions about the size or the, what sort of rates we're thinking of. Maybe there's some parameters in theory, and I'm just wondering.
Well, the program in Whistler works, all it does is, oh, sorry. I didn't
Just maybe staff could clarify that what this does is it takes us out of the Residential Tenancy Act and makes it a condition of employment. So it's up to the employer to find the housing that they need for their employees, regardless of what they get paid. And then the agreement is between the homeowner and the employer. So if they have problems with the tenant, they can go to the employer and say, this person needs to no longer live in my house because they've trashed my suite. And then the employer is responsible for repairing the suite. Maybe that person loses their employment because their housing is tied to it. And then they fix the suite and put in another person who will accommodate it. So it's not really about wages, it's about matching homeowners who might be more open to long-term rental because they've taken the risk out of it being tied to the Landlord Tenancy Act. So now you're in agreement with an employer.
We're actually starting to solve problems here, so I'm sort of cautious that we're looking to get permission to explore this subject, not solve the problem today. So we hear you. Those are the sorts of issues we can address once we get started on the program.
And this is just two programs out of many different programs that are part of the overall governance and affordable housing program. These are just two very specific programs. So to your point, it may or may not deal with what you're asking for, but another program may consider that. That's fair.
Any other questions? All right, option B.
Okay, option B, sorry. So this is very much shifting gears away from housing. We have two initiatives proposed to benefit from potential funding. One is the development of a Squamish Business Accelerator program, and two is the actual implementation of a pilot program initially as part of this funding. And the program development would include a best practice scan of existing accelerator programs, delivery models, and sustainable funding approach, because once we would develop this program and deliver the pilot based on the outcome, we would want to fund it on an ongoing basis or find an organization that will be able to implement it on an ongoing basis. So that would be part of program development and from a consideration perspective. And then the last part would be the delivery of the pilot program, and this would be via a transparent application process that's aimed at our priority sectors of the local economy. And we would evaluate the pilot success and potential for a full-scale rollout. And just to give a little bit more context what I'm talking about in terms of an accelerator, because I know that in past council there's been a lot of discussion around the idea of an incubator, co-working spaces, accelerators, and bricks and mortar buildings versus programming. The idea that economic development has come to the table with is really around developing a network, essentially, of accelerator programs, and essentially holding the hand of the entrepreneur to be able to help them grow effectively. So we wouldn't be trying to recreate the wheel and reinvent the wheel and develop accelerator programs that are already in existence and are quite successful. Instead, we would be trying to identify what works in particular for Squamish businesses, where the needs exist in terms of programs and access to programs, as well as determining where there are some gaps in terms of accelerator programming, and then filling in those gaps with specific programs that are designed and developed through this process to deliver to Squamish businesses. And so an example would be maybe from the previous round of BC Rural Dividend, when the Chamber identified a lack of training for access to training for local staff, and so developed Squamish Excellence. So that would be one component perhaps of the accelerator. But we would be wrapping this up into a package and being able to deliver this effectively and efficiently through economic development, initially as a pilot. The why? Well, there's a lot of beneficiaries of the program locally. So 700 existing small businesses with 1 to 9 employees are here in Squamish. And right now, the top services that have been identified by our Squamish business community that economic development can provide on an ongoing basis is connections to key business organizations, whether that be for funding purposes or incubators or accelerators or so on, and information analysis and tools for business planning purposes. And doing a general audit of what is available locally, really these are 2 key areas that present a gap, and that is one of the reasons why we initiated our open data project, so that we could have better business intelligence for decision-making purposes, whether that's for policy development or whether that's for our local business community to make informed business decisions. So this project or option aligns to the economy and local jobs. It supports the increased productivity and competitiveness among local businesses by facilitation and access to programs, funding, expertise, and research and innovation, and thus leading to employment growth, we hope. The idea is that we wouldn't make it so difficult, and we would be a bit of a concierge service in addition to supplying some of the needed programs in our community. District implications are similar. Total project cost $100K. The district contribution would be $10,000 in kind and $10,000 in cash. We would propose $80,000 from the BC Rural Dividend. We would contract a third party for program development and the initial pilot, but it would be managed by economic development. So that's the second option.
Council, have questions about A or B? Councillor Stoner.
In B, would there be specific business types or sectors that would be targeted by the accelerator program, or is it just kind of general?
So we would be actually focused on small business. We tend to see that more of our larger businesses, when we get into more sophisticated businesses, tend to have resources specifically to do some of the work that we would be able to offer through this programming. So we kind of focus more on the micro and small, so sort of 1 to 9, 1 to 20. And then, yes, in terms of our alignment to our priority sectors, our program development would focus on the growth areas that we're trying to encourage.
Any other questions? If we help small businesses grow through an accelerator program, and they need to hire and recruit more staff, where does their staff live?
It's a great question.
So does staff have a preferred option?
Staff has a preferred option. Well, both options are quite attractive to staff, and staff feel that an accelerator program is probably overdue. It's time to put this together. But the housing seems to be the number one issue throughout the community. We know that provision of workforce housing comes up time and time again, as well as adequate employment space. So I would have to say my preferred option from an economic development standpoint would be making sure that our business infrastructure is in place, so the core needs, the workforce housing and affordable housing as well. So I don't know, Gary.
A. I don't care about B stuff.
Yeah.
No, A for the obvious reason.
Councilor?
I was waiting till the opinion part came around rather than questions. I agree with you really on this one. Being a small business owner, I've had challenges with retention. We've got great, have in the past had good retention and allowed us to invest in training and staff, and where we have turnover in general is housing. So that's my biggest limiting factor in my business is the housing piece. So from experience, on the ground right now, that's where I see the biggest need. So you've conveniently got them in the correct order, I feel, in our agenda here. Not that the accelerator isn't important, is a great idea, and I wish I had access to that earlier in my entrepreneurial career. But right now, I think we need to go all at this housing piece, so we can start to support the businesses that are here and are struggling to retain or grow their staffs. So that's where I'm landing on this one.
Councilor French?
Thank you. It's obvious that A is A for a reason. I think that's the one. As attractive as the Business Accelerator is, it sounds like a great program. I think you're bang on. Housing is the great need. It's too bad we couldn't have it all and apply for both. Get the both. We are being asked to make a choice, and it's A for me. I have no other questions.
Yes. Got Councilor Pettengill, Councilor Stoner, and then Councilor Henderson.
So I think I've long been an advocate of accelerator type things, particularly on the incubator side. But I don't know if I've just gotten to know the right people, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that you hope to see from an accelerator is kind of happening organically. I find it very exciting right now. And when I talk to businesses and what I see on the ground is it's employee housing is one critical obstacle, and the other one is the space to do my business. And we've sort of gone through that with the interim adjustments to the zoning bylaw. So for me, option A, and together, so I got some of the space things, but for now, option A, that's where the priority, I think, is.
Thank you. Councilor Stoner?
Yeah, I think that the data that you shared, Kate, about the number one issue is housing, and then the second issue that you hear is employment space, speaks to the two components that we need to help address for our business community. One of my challenges with going with option A, though, is the potential risk that we take on if we start moving the work forward on workforce rental housing, and how do we ensure that the business community still sees themselves as core and potentially future leaders in taking that work forward. It's another one of those pieces of affordable housing that is starting to fall to municipalities and districts to address, when really I think it should be business and or senior level government. So just curious if you have any thoughts on that in terms of how we make sure that we partner with the business community through the development of that workforce rental housing program and make sure that they see themselves as core and potential future leaders of that.
So through you, Mayor, we have a group called the Connect Place Plan group, and we prioritized our work around business infrastructure in 2018, and workforce housing was number one. So we started the dialogue with independent business, and there's some work that definitely, I agree that businesses need to be able to figure out workforce housing, and it's very important that they take a leadership role, and there'll be consultation and ways to work with the business community and organizations. However, there is policy work, I think, that would benefit around workforce housing, and the district really needs to take a role in that as well. So yes, we will work with the chamber, and we will encourage the chamber to take ownership and Tourism Squamish to take ownership, as much as we will also encourage the local business community to step up. In fact, all we're really doing is setting up the conditions for them to act, not necessarily us acting on the behalf of these businesses. So the vacant land matching program is just setting up the conditions to encourage that type of solution. We're not actually creating the solution. So it will take a partnership approach or collaborative approach in realizing the workforce housing as an outcome. But I think packaging up will make it easier for our local business community to act upon. This is something we've been hearing year after year after year since I've joined the districts, and I don't know that there's been enough action in the area.
Councillor Anderson?
I will also be advocating for option A. We have some impressive feedback from the business community for the survey work that's been done. But something else that you probably have access to is the picture of the diversity of businesses giving that feedback. So from retail to tourist commercials, both small and large manufacturing, resource industries, trades, and government and healthcare services, all across the board share this dilemma, a limiting factor for providing services and conducting business. So I do have a question following from that. What are the possibilities for somebody like, say, the school district or a health clinic to access the matching program, the homeowner matching program? Is there an option for public agencies or entities to do so as well?
We have yet to design the program. The objective would be to design the program to encourage that the final program design considers all the needs of our diverse employers in the community. So I don't think there's any limit set at this time about who can participate and how they participate. It'll be up to the individual employers to be able to identify or self-identify how and if they can participate.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Race?
Well, I'll make a comment. I actually thought there'd be more debate about this, but I'm also in favor of A. So, but I think for the reasons that have been expressed, and for me, it's partly because the last grant we applied for was more business oriented, and this is housing oriented, so it's more partly their turn. But also, I think the real stress in the community is in the housing. Business does require support, but I don't think to the same extent that housing does right now.
Councillor Payne?
Just one final thought, and I understand timelines would make it realistic this time, but there is an opportunity for a $500,000 grant if you go in with a partner, and if there's any way that we could get together as a combination for next year or something and do something together, that would be fantastic, just as a side thought.
Thanks. Happy for option A to go forward. I think once we have our sector strategy complete, which is a project for this year, then it makes more sense to launch the accelerator. And I couldn't agree more with Councillor Stoner in terms of this is not an opportunity for us to take on more in terms of housing. And I appreciate your clarity around creating the conditions for more housing for workforce and not taking on the responsibility for it. I think that's really important. And also why we need a governance structure that can both advocate for more housing and manage programs on behalf of our community. So, do you need a motion? Is there a motion?
I have
You do have a motion.
right here.
That the District of Squamish authorize the submission of application to develop a workforce rental housing program supporting the Squamish affordable housing strategy. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments? Thanks for your work on this. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I am in conflict on the next business item, which is the Community Energy and Emissions Plan, because I am on the board of the Whistler Center for Sustainability. So I will turn the chair over to Councillor Stoner, and I'll be in my office.
Glende on Community Energy and Emissions Plan.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Stoner, Linda Glende, CAO here at the District of Squamish. I'm before Council with a recommendation to sole source a contract with the Whistler Sustainability Centre to complete the Community Energy and Emissions Plan. That is one of the main goals, or one of the goals of Council's strategic plan. As we indicated as staff when we provided the strategic plan update, is that action plan to achieve that goal is currently off the rails, and a way to get it back on the rails is to skip the RFP process and sole source this contract. So as outlined in the memo, but for the public's understanding, the original action plan was to hire a staff member with this expertise to then go out for a request for proposals to have a consultant assist with actually creating the community energy and emissions plan and conduct the public engagement in concert with this staff member. And then the staff member would stay on in terms of the long-term implementation of the plan. In order to attempt, again, to pivot, what we were suggesting is we pivot and hire the contractor now. We feel that we have the staff resources to handle management of the consultants while at the same time continuing to go out and hire for this position. So given the knowledge about the Whistler Sustainability Centre, they are a nonprofit organization based out of Whistler. Their resume, which is included in your package, is long and deep in many areas of work, but primarily in this specific work. They've done community energy and emission planning with several municipalities. Whistler, of course, they did one recently in St. Albert. The most recent they've done is Ucluelet. Whistler's included a whole additional scope of adaptation. The scope that we currently have to achieve Council's goal is 4 stages, which the consultants outlined for us on the phone, and Mr. Wickham, our Director of Engineering, was on the call with me, as well as Mr. Buxton, because they are more the subject matter experts. But I'll just briefly provide the scope. The first is talking about engagement with the public, creating a small task force within the community, so leveraging those technical experts that we are fortunate enough to have in our community to create a task force around this plan, then going out, conducting focus groups with target sectors, and then the public engagement likely would be later in 2020 once the draft plan is targeted for the end of 2019. Essentially, the plan will include background leading practices in terms of this work, some significant modeling to ideally surpass but target the targets that are in your climate emergency motion. Implementation, so creating essentially a work plan and an action list that our staff members and council and staff will implement, and then also including a cultural aspect in terms of economic development, our budgeting process, and the organizational culture around that. It's likely that they do now have the capacity, which again is a huge advantage and why we're recommending sole sourcing, because in talking to the consultants and then their partner, which is Community Energy Association, that both entities have the capacity to complete this right now, which is actually quite surprising and made us quite excited. And then the very ballpark scope is $45,000 on an upper limit. If the scope were to change as we dig into this, it would be spent in 2020 in any event. So based on the work that they can do, 45 is the uppermost limit. It is within our budget. I did speak to finance about reallocating some of the staffing dollars to the plan dollars, which is currently $25,000. $45,000 really will get us the quality that council's looking for in terms of doing this right the first time. And within our purchasing policy, if council wants to sole source, then we are able to do that.
Great.
Do you have anything else to add?
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councilor Panga.
In general, I'm supportive of this, but is there a point at which the mayor would be able to become involved, or a point at which we can have a discussion about the mayor taking a leave of absence, or council, I believe, we can pass a resolution sort of saying we're okay with that board position. It's not a conflict for us, and just this particular topic is a key piece that the mayor is a champion of. I think several of us are, but the mayor definitely, and just from practical terms, moving forward in this, if the mayor has to step out of the room because she's forever in conflict as long as this consultant's involved, it seems to me that's a particular challenge.
That's an excellent question. If I might go to our corporate officer, who can speak to the conflict of interest.
Yes, and if I might, as far as I know, council cannot pass a motion to whisk away conflict. I'd have to take a greater look at what the options would be. Just off the top of my head, it would be that the mayor would need to step away from the board while this is going on if you want her to participate as a council member. So, but I'll look at it a little bit deeper.
Robin, sort of, I guess, do this a little bit in real time, but there's a clear conflict when it comes to awarding a contract, sole source or not,
Absolutely.
right? And which is why she's not in the room. When it comes to them reporting out or us talking about what the goals are or anything like that, I don't see there would be any
Yes.
conflict necessarily.
Absolutely, if you're taking recommendations on the work or anything like that, she's on that board. So if there's any crossover of the, she's made aware at the board level, you can't have your affiliation to two entities. It's one or the other. You make your choice and you step up. So if there's any decision making being made at this level as a result of the work that's being done, the plan, she's in conflict. And I think the honest trust case made that pretty clear. So, but again, I will seek a little bit of I'll look at it a little closer, but you can't wear two hats. That's what the legislation says, you can't wear two hats.
Councilor Haga?
And just for clarity, I wasn't suggesting I would just ignore conflict. I very specifically had the Islands Trust case in mind, which my understanding was that in that sort of situation, council could sort of say that in terms of this sort of board, everyone, the community was comfortable with this, and that was the way. So that's what I was asking for that.
Councilor Herber?
Thank you. I appreciate the sort of pivot here to go in this direction, and I have no problem with the sole sourcing aside from the challenges that we'll have to go through with the mayor not being able to be involved with certain aspects of that. I also think that the work that we're going to be tasking them to do around this table, we all have the same interest with that. It's a key part of our strategic plan, getting this work done, and I'm confident that we can take this on in the mayor's absence. I don't see that as a huge stumbling block for this piece of work. Of course, working with the outcome, we'll be able to do that. Once the report's received or the action plans starts to take shape. So I don't see that being a reason to go another direction, especially considering the work this group's done, and the capacity to take on more work right now, which is a blessing to sort of hit our timelines. So I think I'm comfortable with this arrangement for all those reasons.
Can I just time out and clarify something with
Yeah.
our corporate officer that then I can provide information for you?
Yeah.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. And so just confirming exactly what Councillor Herford said and reiterating what Ms. Arthur said is that once the plan is endorsed and we're implementing the work, then the mayor, if she's on the board, will no longer be in conflict. So the long-term implementation of this specific set of work will not be an issue for her to weigh in.
So it would just be development or any approval of recommendations that were to come forward during the development of the plan.
Correct.
I think so.
Councilor Rice?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to ask what the timeline was. We were voting for this today. What are we looking at for time?
The timeline essentially the first thing that would happen next week is that the consultants would work with staff to detail out the scope and the timeline. But at this point, ballpark timelines, what they believe with doing small task force, some focus groups, draft plan based on a lot of the OCP direction that came out of community engagement would be probably December 19th. I'll buy them some cushion and say January 2020, and then further public engagement in terms of implementation and that side of it would be early 2020, which is close to your current deadline.
Any other questions, Council? Councilor Anderson, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, just offer my support for the proposal. I have worked with the Center for Sustainability Whistler in the SLRD Energy Resilience Task Force in 2011, and I'll be happy to see that we can refer to this body of work that's already been done. On that, during the process of that work, I did note that individual facilitators, and they had a few that they called upon, they can have their specialized perspectives, and sometimes, can be limited in certain ways, but I found them to be quite resourceful in bringing in outside organizations. So I'm particularly happy to see the affiliation, a partnership with the Community Energy Association. So that was a successful project, and then it looks like this has the makings to have that potential here as well.
Great. I will comment as well that thanks to staff for finding an appropriate pivot on this one. That'll get us close to our deadline for getting this project underway and near completion. I do think it is a critical part of our Strategic Planners Council. It has added importance with the climate emergency resolution that was passed by Council about a month ago. And I do think that the Whistler Center Sustainability in partnership with the Community Energy Association is a really great fit for this type of work. The Community Energy Association did do a number of workshops at the newly elected conference that many councillors attended in Richmond a few months ago, specifically around community energy and emissions planning. So I have no doubt that they have a long resume that will support this work, so I'm happy to support the proposal. Councillor French.
I'll move the recommendation if you're ready for it.
Yes, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And we will bring the mayor back. And while she's coming to the room, we'll get Mr. Rolston to set up his presentation. But we won't start until she's back. I'm no longer chair.
This is the consulting. Oh, God. This is it. I didn't even know this was on.
I know, I was too.
Right, so we are,
I did not realize, sorry. No, we're still going.
so we are on community planning infrastructure, eagle viewing area, how do you pronounce that? CHM, thank you, reserve dike master plan. Over to you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is David Rolston, Manager of Municipal Infrastructure with the District of Squamish. A very quick presentation today to recommending award of a consulting contract to complete a dike master plan for the eagle viewing area and CHM reserve. So some quick background is the Integrated Flood Hazard Management Plan recommended completion of this dike master plan due to a significant number of challenges in the area, including a number of different landowners, including the District, Squamish Nation, Crown, and private landowners. There's also quite a significant amount of large infrastructure in the area, including the Dryden Creek pump station, And there are significant dike deficiencies in the area as well. We've witnessed seepage during high water events, and the water level was within half a meter of the dike crest during the 2003 flood. So the district has received $270,000 grant through the National Disaster Mitigation Program. So this project is 100% funded by grants, and that grant application was supported by the Squamish Nation. So the scope of work for this project is to complete a geotechnical investigation, to review options for upgrading the dike through the area, to include community consultation, council consultation, as well as participation and partnership with the Squamish Nation, to complete technical analysis for the different options, and ultimately to arrive at a concept design that would include design drawings and cost estimates that would support future grant applications. So we crafted a request for proposals. We posted it on BC Bid. We received 2 separate proposals and reviewed those in conjunction with the Squamish Nation, and unanimously supported Kerwood Lydell, who we felt submitted the proposal offering the best value to the project. And so our recommendation is to award the consulting contract for the Eagle Viewing Area and CHM Reserve Dike Master Plan to Kerwood Lydell for $269,000 and $484.
I'd just like to add to that, just that last point, working with Squamish Nation. To my knowledge, this is the first time that we've worked so closely with them on a consulting project like this, right from the beginning, right through to them helping with the evaluation matrix. And it's a significant step forward for both our organizations.
Well done. Council, any questions? Yeah, Council Reese.
I'm sorry, I think you might have said it, but this includes looking at the road alignment, other facilities, there's some talk of washrooms, all that kind of thing, parking, it's all included in that kind of...
Yes, it would be. So how the dike upgrade interacts with all of the adjacent area, including, like you say, government road realignment, what has to happen with the watershed grill, how does the dike get upgraded around the pump station, facilities for tourism. There's a landscape architect on the team as well to make sure that the final product is aesthetically pleasing and for the tourist area that it is. So it's quite a comprehensive scope of work.
Councilor.
Thank you. I had some questions around the Squamish Nation consultation, and you looked after that wonderfully in just there. So I'm happy to see that those are answered, and I look forward to seeing what the solutions are in this area. So,
Councilor French?
This is long overdue. Thanks for getting it to us. Giddy up. Let's go. It's exciting.
Is this a super dike design?
Yep, the entire Squamish River dike, with the exception of north of the Mamquam, just the section running immediately north of the Mamquam River is proposed to be a super dike. Having said that, the Squamish Nation have not indicated blanket support for the super dike, particularly where it overlies reserve land. So that is one of the topics that will be resolved through this dike master plan.
Great. And so Kerwood Lydell has a whole engagement plan with the nation with our support?
Yes, it's a very comprehensive engagement plan. We'll be presenting to Squamish Nation numerous times throughout, as well as interacting closely with their staff, so, and as well with this council and with a separate stakeholders group. So the consultation is a really key aspect to this project.
Thanks. Any other questions? Councilors? Moved by Councilor Reese. Second by Councilor Stoner. Can you speak to Councilor Reese?
Well, very briefly, and I echo Councilor French's comments. It was almost 16 years ago that we almost lost that dike, and so all I can say is finally. Thank you.
Councilor Stoner.
Thank you for all your work on this, and for I do think it is notable the amount of engagement that we've had with Squamish Nation on it. I know that the diking system is a sore point perhaps in our history with the nation, and so it's great to see this come forward with such good partnership from the beginning, and I think that's really important to the success of the project. It's not going to be easy. I think this is the start of some difficult conversations, but I'm really encouraged to see a thorough consultation plan as well as staff-to-staff collaboration. I think that that's really great to see that that's coming to fruition. So thank you.
Yes.
I'm very happy to read that the, right down to selecting the proponent was done with the nation, and I think, like others have said, it's just fantastic to see us moving that direction.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have correspondence to receive for information. I'm going to pull item 5, because I said that earlier today. Any other ones? That's all right.
Is item 1 along the same lines? Or continue both?
Oh, yeah. 1 and 5. Any others?
Is that a challenge?
I'm looking at you, Captain Van Gel, just waiting. No.
Surprises.
Can I ask a point of clarification? Why are some bolded and others not?
They were added after the agenda was published, so they're amended. I will just add briefly, this didn't hit the agenda, but probably just want to note, because this email came in after the deadline, is that the Solterra Kite Clash is August 22nd to 25th. Another big event in our community, and we had an invitation from the Kite Clash organizers for council to attend and take in the event. They just want to have us read that out since they missed the deadline for correspondence, so I will do that. Otherwise, I will move receipt of the rest of the letters. Moved by Councillor Stoner, or second by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I'll tuck my pulled letters at the end of correspondence for action. So the first one we'll deal with is that correspondence received from Mr. Shear dated July 12th regarding this motion District Forestry Association be referred to the Manager of Real Estate and Director of Engineering for consideration. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Herford.
Just a correction of pronunciation. I began making this mistake myself, but Brian calls himself Shire.
Oh, sorry.
Brian Shire.
Brian Shire.
And I wonder whether, at staff's discretion, whether this might also be referred to economic development, as there has been some liaison between them, I understand, going back some ways regarding bioeconomy topics.
Would you want to check that with your seconder to see if that's all right?
Yep.
Your seconder is Councillor Herbert?
That's good.
All right. Manager of Real Estate, Director of Engineering and Economic Development for consideration. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have a request for a letter of support for the Cutting Barriers Grant application to the BC Rural Dividend Fund. This is the same fund we're applying for. I don't know if our CAO has any comments on whether we are entering into a competitive bid process by supporting this. I mean, no problem generally supporting cutting barriers, but at least council should know whether.
Through you, Mayor, there's no specific indication that applications from areas are competing against one another. So that officially there's no limit on an area around how much of the rural dividend could be applied to an area. And there's nothing to say that we can't support both. That said, anecdotally, it could be that they want to, quote unquote, spread the wealth through the province, in which case it would be. So it's not a black and white yes or no for you, I'm afraid. It's a guess, frankly.
Council, it doesn't say in the letter how much they're applying for.
There's 7,000.
That's what we provided. Council, I'm sorry,
Might I suggest then that the motion be amended to add some language, if it's determined by staff that this doesn't compete with grant, if you want to prioritize the grant we just heard about?
It's up to council, that's just a suggestion. Councilor Herford?
Is it safe to assume that if there are other nonprofits putting something forward, they'd be asking us for a similar letter? Just trying to understand the number that are out there for our community.
In terms of this particular grant?
This particular,
Well, they won't get a letter of support before September, and the grant is due August 15th.
right, so
this
it's the
is-
safest assumption it's us and these folks, so they're not gonna see 20 from Squamish and just adding to it. So,
Well, they may, but
we don't. Right. I'm supportive of moving this forward. I think, I'm happy to take the chance that we get both.
so you're moving a letter of support,
All the letters.
seconded by Councilor Pangill. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have another piece of correspondence from M. McLeish about daycare licensing. For council's consideration. This must be in our blue pages.
It's in the packet, it's on the last page of it.
I believe in my email, I just saw that staff have already responded to this. Mr. Janet, Mr.
Yes, I just chatted to Sarah and she said yes, she has been in communication with the rider. We're waiting on provincial inspections, not municipal.
It's a tough one. I feel for a lot of families in Squamish. I went through it myself when my kids were little, and it's just gotten worse. And but I think there's also, it's important, and I think Ms. McJanet's response to Ms. McLeish is important because it does reflect provincial jurisdiction versus municipal. And hopefully if there's anything that we need to take care of from a municipal piece in terms of getting in the way of daycare, hopefully we've already done. I think we have. And it's just helping people understand that there is provincial jurisdiction here that we are running up against. But we are trying to facilitate more and better access to daycare through the planning grant that we received and by securing funding for more spaces. So we're going to do as much as we can, but the province really does need to be at the table on this one.
So move receipt.
Move receipt, Council Ray, seconded by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. And then I wanted to pull the letter from Lady Smith and the other letter referring to support for libraries. I actually think that we as a council should also send a letter of support to the minister on this issue. Funding for libraries has been stagnant for quite some time and they add so much value to communities. Ours is certainly a hub and a place that people go to, not only for information, but for imagination programs and to learn about new technologies. So I would like to move that we send a letter of support, seconded by Councilor French. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to close. Moved by Councilor Herford, seconded by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
You see here, we move